Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Um, I'm sure as I walked up, at least a couple of you have noticed my white shoes. कोई सोच रहा होगा जितेंद्र के जूते पहन के आया है. So this is my trick on the occasion of the hat trick of ASCENT, that even if you don't remember me for what I said, you will remember me for my shoes. You have to pardon me for my heavy voice. I have a bit of a flu, and I was not sure that I would be able to make it today, but I was very keen to, and I'm glad I did, because as I can see, many of you, we are of the same generation, and our generation has grown up, at least I have grown up in the corporate world believing that the M in marketing stands for Mariwala. And I'll tell you why. No, I mean it in all sincerity, not because Mr. Mariwala is here, but because I've met some of his competitors. Some of his ex-colleagues are my colleagues, and I have not heard of a bigger rock star reputation in marketing than his, both for ideas and particularly, if I may say so, for execution. I assumed that this is a marketing conclave or a marketing business strategy conclave. And the bad news I have to start with is this, that I am not a marketing person by education. But the good news, as David Packard told us, is marketing is too important to be left to the marketing people. So it's not such a bad thing that I'm not a marketing person. But again, it's a great privilege to be here. And just when I walked in, not just from the size of the audience, but from the quality of the audience, I just sense that it's going to be a very high quality day, so it's a great privilege. Thank you, sir, for inviting me to be part of this. I've been asked to speak on the subject called If I Knew Then What I Know Now. So, in other words, if I were to be able to reflect, what would I think would have been precious to know before, 20 years ago, that I know now? And I think the most important thing would be to know, for me to have known then, which I did not know then, that fortune favors the brand, because I'm an engineer and engineers believe in products, engineers don't understand brands. And I've had to climb up that learning curve in my own hard way. I've also been asked to focus particularly on failures. Mr. Mariwala did that himself this morning. And there's no problem with that. There's so many along the way. And frankly, the consolation is that everybody makes mistakes. Next, please. So, as Mr. Mariwala mentioned, we are all part of a business environment where success is very elusive. I call it almost a crime, because to fail 90 or 95% of the time in what we do is very hard to condone. I mean, just ask yourself, would we send our children to schools that fail 90-95% of the time? Would we go to doctors that fail 90-95% of the time? Would we believe in a sport that fail 90-95% of the time? Would we believe in marriage? Okay, let's not go there. We can leave that out right now. And if you think that this is a statistic that comes from consultants, let me give you another piece of information that comes straight from the Mecca of management. Next, please. So like Mr. Mariwala, I am not a great fan of business schools either. But my family is. They all went to Harvard Business School. I am the only one that did not get admission to Harvard Business School. Even my brother-in-law was a great visionary. He went to Harvard Business School only so he could get married to my sister 10 years later. Manish Kejriwal, maybe some of you know him. So this is a statistic that comes from the Harvard Business Review of 2011, which effectively again says that very, very few products and services actually succeed. And I find this a little ironic, because in my view, the people that fail very often fail doing the stuff that is taught at Harvard Business School. And if you think I'm saying that because I'm miffed because I didn't get to go to business school at Harvard, let me show you in a moment a short clip from Professor Clayton Christensen that you may have heard of, very famous author, a tenured professor from Harvard. And this is what he had to say about why companies fail and what they teach you at Harvard Business School. Can we have the video, please?
Why is success so difficult to sustain? If you look across the sweep of business history, most companies which at one point were widely regarded as unassailably successful, a decade or two later you find them in the middle of the pack and often at the bottom of the heap. And I reached the strangest conclusion after having studied this for a number of years, which is that it's actually the principles of good management that we teach at the Harvard Business School that sow the seeds of every company.
Oh, that got cut off. He says, I've come to realize it's actually the principles of good management we teach at Harvard Business School that sow the seeds of every company's eventual failure. I don't know how that got missed. So this is actually Professor Clayton Christensen saying this. Next, please. So when I started my own journey, I contemplated, as we all have done, what makes success? Is it based on technology? When I looked at competition, especially from Japan in the form of Honda and Yamaha, this was an obvious. Quality, as Mr. Mariwala said, no shortcuts there. Cost is always important, distribution is important, advertising or communication is important, all of this is important. But somehow, I was not very convinced because I saw too many examples of companies that had great technology but were not necessarily successful, that had great quality but were not necessarily successful. And in fact, it seemed to me that levers like those of distribution or advertising were not actually the cause of success, but the result of success. I mean, when you start on day one with one product, how do you go out there and create a huge distribution network? Or how do you get 10 or 20 or 100 crore to advertise? You cannot. You have to earn it. And it is only after you are successful that you are actually able to go out there and create or rather scale up and create the distribution network you want or afford the spends that you would like to have in advertising. So some of these are not even the cause of success, they are the result of success. Next, please. And then my moment of clarity came when a long time back, again, I read a book by Al Ries and Jack Trout, the very well-known marketing consultants. And this simple sentence has stayed with me for the last 20 years, which effectively says that most people fail because they try not to create something, but to take a slice of somebody else's something. And I think that is what is great about entrepreneurs. And I'm told the larger majority of the audience today are entrepreneurs, people who do not wish to serve an existing market, but wish to create, or at least create the perception of a new segment or a new market. And I think that is the single most important point on the journey to success. I think most people fail to truly come to terms with it. I mean, everybody understands that, but in their behavior, most people, I feel, in my experience, fail to come to terms with this because human beings are very intuitive. You observe a certain situation and your first response, your first impulse is very, very intuitive based on everything you've learned so far. I have learned the hard way, and as I said, I emphasize again, I'm not a marketing person. I've learned the hard way that the problem with marketing is it's very, very counterintuitive. One needs to be very calm, very quiet, very humble, and only then one is able to set aside the first impulsive reaction, intuitive reaction, and go deeper into finding something that is counterintuitive that will work in the marketplace. For example, as an engineer, I always thought, better is better. If I make a better product, the world will beat a path to my door. But I found that there is a subtle difference between being better and being different. And if a competitor of mine, in those days Hero Honda, which is now Hero Motors, has made a certain product, I can go to the market screaming from the rooftops, claiming to have made a better product. It will not make an impact. I lost 20 years of my life trying to make a better product and succeeding in the marketplace. It is only when we started doing things differently from 2001 with the Pulsar, the first product and certainly the first motorcycle ever to be designed and manufactured by Bajaj itself, and not through a collaboration with Vespa or Kawasaki as we had in the past. It is only when we did something different like that that we tasted success in the marketplace. So how can one put a little more color, make it a little more granular to understand what is better and what is different? So I had a choice for today, either to put this across a little softly or to make it a little hardcore. So I have, maybe at the risk of boring some of you, made it a little more specific based on my experience in the hope that some of my examples from my experience will be useful at least to some of you. Next, please. In the pursuit of this kind of a strategy, let's call it a strategy to be different as opposed to just being better, I found very useful a book that you might want to read called Marketing Warfare, again by Rees and Trout. The essence of the book is captured on the left side of the slide, where essentially the authors propose that there are that marketing is a war, and there can be 4 kinds of warfare fundamentally. I'm sure some of you are familiar with this. On the top left of the square is what is called defensive warfare, not defensive in the weak sense, but in the strong sense that you are sitting on a fort, you are the leader, you defend your leadership. On the right of that is offense, where you take on a leader more or less head on. Bottom left is called flanking, this is their terminology, and on the right is called guerrilla. The analogy with which I like to explain this is on the right. So if you use this tomorrow, you have to give me the credit for that because that is my innovation. So I use soda cans for that to say, if you are Coke and you are the leader, then defense is your strategy. Improve your product, improve your communication, improve your cost, improve your quality, improve your customer relation, improve your whatever it is. If you are going to challenge them, but you still want to make a cola, I as Pepsi, then you have to do something different. And Pepsi did something different. If you want to create an even greater perception of being different, you want to tell mothers that kids may get bad teeth drinking cola, but if they drink 7-Up, they'll be fine because it's transparent and there is no caffeine or whatever it is that cola has. Then maybe you create a clear drink. A clear drink is not a cola. It is so different from Coke that it is almost the opposite. And then, of course, if you want to seduce all these people, young people who go out at night and want to drink something fancy, you go to Thailand and drink something called Red Bull, and then you create a perception in a small can of a big potency, and you market it as something you can drink and which does wonderful things for you. So these are the examples from the soda world of defense, offense, flanking, and guerrilla. Having come this far, I still found that I have not gone the last mile in this, because a question may come to your mind that if Pepsi is not Coke, it is not Coke because it is, as we all know, sweeter than Coke. How much sweeter is better and how much sweeter is different? This is not the problem of the consultants that write the book, but this is the problem of the entrepreneurs that have to make the Pepsi. Should it be 2% sweeter than Coke, 5% sweeter than Coke, 50% sweeter than Coke? Do you go overboard and talk about health and fail because people wanted taste? So we have to have, I found, at least when I'm making a motorcycle, and I'm sure this applies to everything, I found that we have to have some calibration, some quantification. Because in a company of 500,000, in my case 9,000 people, how can I explain strategy to people, not only to the chairman, but all the way down to the watchman? And sometimes I can tell you, chairman is bigger problem than watchman to explain the strategy. So how to explain exactly what you want to do to R&D, marketing, sales, production, if you just leave it at a qualitative level? So this is what I have found useful for me. The next one, please. Going from strategic square to strategic specification. And this is how we have used it in our motorcycles. See, in the motorcycle world, there is a saying that comes from the US. There is no replacement for displacement. Displacement means the size of the engine. We say cubic capacity or cc. It is often referred to as displacement. The most important thing in a motorcycle is the size of the engine. The most important thing in a car that all of you have is the size of the car. Very few people know the size of the engine of the car. And people don't care about the size of the body of the motorcycle because more or less they're all the same. It's the size of the engine. We say there is no replacement for displacement. Why this is so important is because from this one parameter, engine size, people have very fixed perception of everything else. It doesn't matter what you and I say in communication. If the engine is bigger, the vehicle has more power. If the engine is bigger, it has more torque. If the engine is bigger, it is more expensive. If the engine is bigger, it is more prestigious. If the engine is bigger, the maintenance is more. If the engine is bigger, the mileage is less. And you can never convince people otherwise. And as you know, as marketeers or entrepreneurs, we must all bow before perception. We cannot change perception. We have to use it to our advantage. How we have used this to our advantage in our business is like this. So on the top left, you see my main competitor, that is Hero. Their main product or brand, which is Splendor, a motorcycle, 100cc motorcycle. So again, I said 100cc because that's the size of the engine, called Splendor. And we employed the strategy of offense, flanking, and guerrilla, or different, opposite, and niche, in this way, which we learned actually through experience. We didn't have this formula when we started. What we realized is, if we improve anything by less than 10%, which you see on the right at the top, whether it is power, torque, mileage, comfort, or even reduce the price by, say, 5%, it doesn't help anybody. The consumer almost doesn't feel a change when the degree of change is less than 10% in whatever parameter it is that one is trying to change. So very often as engineers, we would feel, इतना mature business है, motorcycles, IC engines, 4% we have improved the mileage. कोई वावा करता ही नहीं है. Consumers don't feel it because by law of averages, it just gets lost. 10 to 20% improvement in a parameter, for example, fuel efficiency in a motorcycle. We would be often surprised that if Hero made a 10% improvement in their motorcycle, people would go crazy. People would go nuts buying their motorcycles. If we made a 10% improvement, nothing would happen. Then what do? The normal thing, you blame your marketing head, you blame the ad agency, you blame the dealers, you blame everyone else. What we learned was an improvement of 10 to 20% in your chosen attribute or chosen parameter helps only the market leader. It doesn't help the challenger. So very often we think कि उसने किया, मैंने किया, लेकिन मेरे को कोई फायदा नहीं मिला. This is because consumers will reward the market leader much before or for much less improvement than they will you. So this is a number we associate with the defense strategy or the strategy of making something better, but better is not different. We found that if we make a change of 20 to 33%, and that is how we created the motorcycle called Discover, a 125cc motorcycle. Then the perception starts becoming different. The perception of people became, this is also a mileage motorcycle because it is 125, but with 25% more capacity, this will also give me some joy of riding. The perception started changing. And we developed a very large franchise for this before we made the biggest blunder, at least in my career, and I'll come to that again later. We had enormous success with this motorcycle, which at one point of time even overtook Hero in terms of the monthly sales of Splendor. So we have found that if we are planning something as an offense strategy, We want to be a cola, but not to be the same. 20 to 33% should be the degree of change vis-a-vis the leader. When we created the Pulsar in 2001, a motorcycle which I think changed the perception of Bajaj in the marketplace, we did it as a strategy of flanking, 33 to 55% different, and that is why the Pulsar was a 150cc motorcycle. And the perception of people was, this is not a mileage motorcycle, this is a power motorcycle, this is a large motorcycle, this is a prestigious motorcycle. I don't want to buy what the herd is buying, which is a Hero 100cc motorcycle. I will buy this motorcycle. Some people think like that. Of course, it starts small. Every successful product starts from a niche. When we invested in KTM, which was then Europe's second largest motorcycle maker and is now the largest ahead of BMW, that was way back in 2007. We went for a motorcycle that was not even a motorcycle for the roads, it was a motorcycle for the racetrack. Its performance was so far out, more than 50% away from anything that this country had seen. And that became the basis to create a new brand or to create a new segment in this market with the brand KTM. So 10 to 20, 20 to 33, 33 to 50, and 50 to 100. These numbers help us in our company to align everybody to the same goals when it comes to our product strategy. Finally, there is the discontinuous strategy and the disruptive strategy, not so relevant for today. An example of discontinuous strategy would be electric vehicles, for example. There is no engine anymore, there is no CC anymore. It's a totally different world. And a disruptive strategy would be, for example, that of shared mobility, where you don't even own your two-wheeler. You go out there and you pick it up, it's dockless, you use it, you leave it anywhere you like, and this is started in some places in the world. So I've spent a lot of time on this slide, although it's very Bajaj Auto specific, because really at the level of the detail, this is the sauce or this is the technique based on which whatever little success we have achieved has been achieved. To step back from this now, I'd like to take you to one of my passions or stress busters, which is homeopathy, and quickly share with you three of the very overarching principles of homeopathy. Next, please. The first one is called individualization. As this wise man said, the true enemy of man is generalization. If we look at any situation in life and speak of it or perceive it in general terms, nothing is achieved. Everything has to be looked at individually. And I think the concept of individualization in homeopathy and that of differentiation in marketing is the same. Differentiation is also nothing but USP, for example. What is unique about me? Individualization is also about what is unique about me as a person. And that which is unique about us, as we all know, is not what we have in common with everybody else in this room, but what we have in uncommon with everybody else in this room. That is what makes us who we are. That is what makes our brand or our product what it is. We found a way to apply this to our business model. I don't have the time to go into the detail of that. But how do you create for your business, your own architecture, something unique, something different that has a point of difference vis-a-vis your major competitor? I think this is a very important principle, the principle of individualization, to keep in mind for that. Next, please. The second, easier said than done, is the principle of holism. Very often, in the interest of speed, swift decisions, the need to be decisive, we look at only one or two things, like the blind man on the elephant, and draw some conclusion from it. It is so important to sit back and look at a situation holistically and for the long term. For example, as Mr. Mariwala described, in dealing with a very deep-rooted labor situation of those times. Because otherwise, we are going to end up missing the elephant completely. I had my own moment with labor in 2007, very briefly. I wanted to shut down the plant in Pune, our first plant, that was my father's first baby, that made scooters, because I didn't want to make scooters anymore. It was 2007, we had 3,500 workmen there. And whoever I went to for counsel said to me, there is no way you can shut this. First of all, in India, you cannot shut down, you cannot fire. Plus, Bajaj Auto is a big name. You're an enormously profitable company. You are very big in Pune. There is no way that you will ever get permission for this. And of course, if you go out handing out money in terms of the government formula of a VRS scheme, no workman is going to take it. Long story short, one evening, I was with a senior colleague of my father's, who is now 85 and still comes on Wednesdays to have lunch with me and kind of I bounce ideas of him. His name is Mr. Jain. So one evening in July 2007, I was with Mr. Jain, doing what we always do, which is sitting in the club and having a drink. And I said to him, sir, bada problem hai. I have to shut this place down. It's too much of a drain. What do we do? So Mr. Jain knew that my father would never allow this. So he said, chairman kahan hai? So my father was that time member of the Rajya Sabha. I said, chairman to Delhi mein. He said, kal hi notice laga do phir. I said, bina puche notice laga do. Pehle notice lagao, phir baad mein dekha jayega. So we put up a notice. Effectively, I think we took a holistic view of the situation in the sense that, of course, we took into consideration the fact that my father was not there. That was the most important aspect of the thing. But effectively, our communication to the workmen was, from today till the day of your retirement, whatever you would have earned by working here, we will give you. Now you please go home and enjoy your life and let us do our work. That was the essence of our communication. And there was a huge uproar. From local protests to the cabinet in Maharashtra, everything, I don't want to name the politicians and the media and all, you know this very well. There's lots of noise, but nothing happened. And the notice said in 2 weeks' time, we are shutting down. Believe me, when 2 weeks was over, 3,500 people at the end of the shift put turbans around their head, and they had music and they had band baja, and like a barat, they thanked us and they left the company. So anything can be achieved if you take a holistic view. We did not sack anybody. We said to them, thank you very much. You have built the foundation on which we have to build the future. Now you go and garden or play with your grandkids or whatever it is you have to do. Let us make motorcycles the way they should be made, and you don't have the skills for that. So that was an example of looking at things holistically. And the third principle for today, next please, is that of vitality. See, it doesn't matter whether you're an allopath or a homeopath or a naturopath or anything. Every doctor believes that we have an immune system and all our health resides in this immune system. I have a flu for the last 2 days. I said to Mr. Mariwala that the weather is changing a lot in Pune. It was warm, cold, and finally it rained. This is why I have a flu. But I know this is only in homeopathy it is called the exciting or the extraneous cause. This is not the fundamental cause. Because if the weather was a fundamental cause, everybody in Pune should have been sick. At least my wife and son should have also been sick. Everybody else is fine, only I am sick. So there is no problem with the weather. There is a problem with my immunity. It is the same in companies. Very easily we blame FM and PM and RBI and Trump and North Korean fellow, I can't pronounce his name, all these kind of people. But the problem is that we don't really ask ourselves, sometimes at least I feel, I have made that mistake. What is wrong with the immunity of my organization? I mean, for the longest time, from the 60s, well, we started in the 57 or so, till 2001 when we made our own Pulsar. I mean, we had a R&D as in a name board called R&D, but we had not one new product of our own to show. Now, for a market leader, that doesn't speak very well. I mean, candidly speaking, till today, Hero has not one new product that they put out themselves. Everything they have is a propagation of what Honda left with them. So I never had much respect for the internal vitality of Bajaj till 2001 because there was no evidence of it. So how to strengthen yourself from within first? And just for ample clarity, I am not anti-allopathy. Whatever helps, helps. But my submission is only that if you break your leg, you first do physiotherapy and strengthen it, and then if necessary, use a crutch. So in the same way, to strengthen oneself from within, one should resort, I believe, to homeopathy or Ayurveda or these kind of true, deep, old sciences. And if nothing works, then allopathy is always there. But if you make that a first resort, I'm not sure. So with these three principles of homeopathy, individualization, holism, and vitality, we have crafted a certain strategy for ourselves, and we follow some principles. I thought it might be useful to share it with you. Next, please. So what is our corporate strategy in which you can hopefully see some semblance of individualization, holism, and vitality? Our corporate strategy rests on three legs because it takes 3 points for a plane to be stable. First and foremost, we wanted to be a global company. And that's the reason we stopped making scooters, because we found without exception that if you want to go from being domestic or a regional player to a global player, as you broaden the basket of markets you want to address, you have to narrow the portfolio of products that you offer. Taking everything everywhere is a recipe for disaster. So it was not that we were anti-scooter or pro-motorcycle. It was just that in the pursuit of being global, we knew we had to do one thing. And I always tell my people, even today, McDonald's is a $20 billion company serving a vada pav all over the world. And Starbucks is a $20 billion company serving one effectively cutting chai all across the world. If they can create such big businesses out of one cup of coffee and one vada pav, why should we feel defensive that by making one motorcycle worth 50,000 rupees, we cannot create a big business across the world? You know? Then, of course, to compete across the world, it is very necessary to have deep differentiation. I spoke about that a little bit. And of course, I believe, keep yourself very light, very nimble. Don't have heavy feet with fixed costs. Keep the costs very light, keep them very variable. That depends on how you manage your supply chain. A little more elaboration for those who might find it useful next. So when we look at global markets, we don't look at it in terms of emerging, developed, and that would be a very cliched way to look at it. For us, the center of our markets is our volume business, our motorcycle business, because that gives us our skills and our scale. And around it, we think we can build niches. That is a valid strategy, we believe, to build niches that are resonant with that back end. So if we can take those skills and cost structure upstairs into the area of superbikes, we will do that with a KTM or tomorrow with a Triumph. If we can bring it to the left, intracity is how we refer to internally to our three-wheeler business and now our four-wheeler or quadricycle business. So my father will always, even today he says to me, you say you are a motorcycle maker, scooter nahi banaoge, lekin three-wheeler to bana rahe ho. So I tell him the difference between scooter and three-wheeler is, scooter is a mass business like motorcycles. Never engage in two mass businesses at the same time till you become a leader first in one and then you move to the other. Anybody who tries to climb two big mountains at the same time is definitely going to fall. But if you have one big business, one big challenge, and on the side of it, if you have a nice, niche, profitable business, that is not necessarily in conflict with strategy. So that has been my justification for carrying on with the three-wheeler business, where incidentally Bajaj is the global leader, making almost 800,000 vehicles a year. So why would I throw that out? In my view, that would be throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And lastly, on the right side, a new business we want to create, the business of urbanite or intracity or electric vehicle, call it what you may. Basically, urban mobility. Our cities are congested, they are polluted. How can we take our skills and cost structure forward in such a way that tomorrow we can present our world or the cities of our world with very clean, very green vehicles which are suitable for urban mobility or intracity movement. So this is the way we look at markets, one volume and resonant niches around that volume. Next. Now in terms of deep differentiation, this is very, very important again, I think. Everybody understands brand, you must have a brand, a sharp brand. But a sharp brand is that which rests on one single attribute. They say in marketing, nothing is more powerful than owning one word. That one word, Heinz is thick. That Heinz is thick or BMW is driving pleasure is the mecca of marketing. So that sharp brand which rests on that one single attribute and creates a new category for itself. This is very important to our strategy of deep differentiation. As I said in the beginning, as an engineer for the longest time, I did not understand the difference between a brand and a product. I mean, this is an iPhone. It is a brand, it is a product. What part of it is brand, what part of it is product? I think I understand it better now. Next, please. I've come to realize that the product is only, although undoubtedly the most important part of the brand, it is only one part of the brand. That about the brand, which is more than the product, next please, is the story and the experience of the brand. Every brand has a story. It doesn't matter whether it's Harley Davidson, which has its own story, or Mahatma Gandhi, who has his own story. The product is gone. Mahatma Gandhi cannot live forever. But the story is still there. And the experience of those, including those of my forefathers, who experienced Gandhiji, that experience is there. So when you think of Coke, you don't think of only the product called Coke. Subconsciously, whether you like it or not, some story of Coke will play in your mind. Some experience of Coke, maybe from a childhood, maybe from a school time, maybe with your mother, maybe with someone else, will come to your mind. So this, I think, to me, is my understanding of the difference between brand and product. So when we say we want to create brands, when we go to the drawing board for a new motorcycle, we don't just try to create a new product. And I would suggest to you that whatever product or service you're dealing with, don't try to create just the physical product, which is the tangible aspect of the brand. You know, in the Bihar School of Yoga, there is a saying, what is the difference between mind and body? Mind is also a physical thing. The brain is also a physical organ, running all the way down to the spine. They say the mind is the subtle form of the body, and the body is the gross form of the mind. And we can spend half an hour on this topic alone. But essentially they're saying your mind goes from the top of your head to the bottom of your soul. In a way, all of you is mind at a subtle level, and in a way, all of you is body at a gross level. So I say to my people that the product is the gross form of the brand is the subtle form of the product. Our job is to design not only the product, our job is to also design the story behind the product. Some of you may have, for example, be aware of a product called V, which we launched 2 years back, where the fuel tank was made including material, scrap material that we got from the ship Vikrant when it was broken down. There was no need for us to spend any money in communication. The fact, the PR was so strong about Vikrant being, INS Vikrant being broken down, that scrap material being taken, melded into the sheet metal, and the product being made out of that. That story was the compelling proposition more than the product. So a brand is equal to product plus story plus experience at the point of retail or wherever it is that or online, wherever it is the consumer encounters the brand. Next, please. And the product itself, we further break down. So these layers are very important. You know, start from differentiation to brand to product. Every product, whether it's soap or whether it's a motorcycle, I think fundamentally it stands on these three legs. Its design, which means how does it look? Square, round, big, small, pretty, ugly, old, new, classic, sober, whatever. Its performance, however the performance is measured, whether it's by taste, whether it's by lather, whether it's by speed, whatever it is, and the price. And when we try to create differentiation, we have to ask ourselves, where are we trying to make that 20% or 33% or 50% difference? Is it in design? Is it in performance? Is it in price? Difficult to do it in all three, although that would be ideal. So we feel at the end of the day, the best endorsement of our strategy is when we can connect these 9 points from deep differentiation, singular attribute, a new category, sharp brand, credible story, tangible experience, distinct design, true performance, and price. These 9 dots can be connected into a simple sentence that a salesman should be able to tell a customer when he walks in, ki aap mera kyun lo? Because it all fails over there otherwise. This is all okay inside the company. But ultimately when a competitor comes in saying, customer comes in saying, why not that? The salesman who's paid probably 15,000 rupees a month has to deliver in one simple sentence this USP or point of difference. Why should you buy mine? Finally, and I won't take too much time on that, is the aspect of variable costs. Next, please. How we build a modular platform for product and process. what kind of improvement process we put in place, and how we use global sourcing. All these three come together to keep our costs very light, but I won't spend time on this because it's perhaps not relevant at all to this audience. Friends, finally, you've been patient so long, give me another 5 minutes. I leave you with 8 thoughts on marketing that I have found very, very precious in my experience. Next, please. As I said before, the problem with marketing is it's very contraintuitive. So these are the contraintuitive truths or aphorisms that I have found upon reflection. I wish I knew then what I know now. The first is, be very clear who your competitor is. Because there are no virgin markets. Whatever we try to do, there is some kind of competition out there already. And as Mr. Trout always taught me, Jack Trout of Trout and Rees, he was our consultant for some time, and I developed a very close personal relationship with him. And over several years, he taught me things that I'm going to share with you now. And the first was, what your customers want doesn't matter. What your competition permits you is what matters. And this is not to say customers are not important, obviously not. But the example is this. Bajaj has existed in India for 50 years. And we are still number 2 in India because we made a mistake with the Discover, as I alluded to earlier. If we hadn't made that mistake, things would have been different. But the reality is, we are still number 2. Hero still has 50% share, we have only 20% share. But believe it or not, we went to Africa, the continent of Africa, from Kenya to Nigeria, only 12 years ago. Nobody knew Bajaj there. They couldn't even pronounce our damn name. We didn't know customers in 20 countries in Africa. In 12 years, we are a market leader in Africa. Every third motorcycle sold in Africa is designed and developed by us. Now you tell me, the point is not to convey to you how big we are in Africa. The point is to tell you, we know shit about customers in Africa. I have never been to Africa in my life. None of my people want to travel there. My CTO has never been there. My CEO has never been there. How can we say that customer centricity drives success? The important thing was, in Africa, we had much weaker competition, i.e. primarily Japanese and some Indian competition, compared to here, where we had Honda and Yamaha and Suzuki and Kawasaki and the whole world sitting on our head. It was the difference in the nature of competition that made it much harder to succeed in this market, and relatively Africa was a cakewalk. Next, please. The second truth, or the contraintuitive truth I have realized is, when you attack a competitor, now you've identified your competition, do not attack the weakness of the competitor. You know, you go after Coke because Coke is a little expensive. Coke can correct his price tomorrow. It is very easy for people to correct their weakness. You have to find weakness in the strength. The strength of Hero is their reputation for mileage as a 100cc motorcycle. Fill it, shut it, forget it, is Hero Honda. What is the weakness in the strength? People's perception is, जो motorcycle mileage देती है वो power नहीं दे सकती. So Hero can make the most powerful motorcycles in the world. As long as they wear a Hero badge, people will never believe that they are as powerful as they actually are. So find the weakness in the strength of the competitor, which he cannot change. Then you are on more secure ground. Contra 3, next please. We must accept, when we choose to compete on a certain parameter like that, that our share of the market will eventually be only as important as that parameter we have chosen to compete on is in the mind of the customer. As Mr. Mariwala said, if taste is here and health is here, your share will be only 5%. When we went after Hero, saying, we also give mileage, we got nothing. So we chose a second parameter, or a second attribute as it is called in marketing terms. It is called comfort. That if you ride a motorcycle called the Bajaj Platina, you will be more comfortable because of these tangible features that the motorcycle has. The minute we offered something different, we started doing well. But we cannot sell as many Platina based on comfort as Hero sells based on mileage, because the attribute of comfort is not as important as the attribute of mileage. So one must be very, very realistic in one's expectation from a chosen strategy. Next, Contra 4. Once one proceeds down that path, you know your competition, you've chosen your parameter, Now you have to reposition the leader. There is a leader in the marketplace that you have to reposition, and you have to narrow your focus. This is what we did very well with the Discover when we went to the 125cc machine, which seemed to offer mileage with a little fun. And so many people bought it that for a particular month, we actually overtook Hero, Discover versus Splendor. And then what happened? The classic thing, greed came in, and marketing people said, 125cc Discover itna bikta hai, to 100cc Discover kitna bikega? And we went ahead and we made a 100cc Discover. We lost our position, and 5 years later, we lost our performance. Because suddenly, those 9 dots were not connected anymore. We started off with a point of difference, a different perception, a USP, and we ended up becoming a Me Too, finally. So Me Too is bad in life and in marketing, it doesn't matter. Never Me Too. Next one, Contra 5. Once you have narrowed your position, avoid greed at all costs and avoid diffusing yourself and your service at all costs. I liked very much what I heard the other day, that this fellow, I don't know his name, Ritesh Agarwal, I think, of Oyo. He said at some forum that I am the chief clarity officer of my company, that is Oyo, because my job is to tell people what not to do. And this is absolutely true, I think, for the entrepreneur that leads the organization. Michael Porter said this at Harvard. One good thing happened at Harvard, that Michael Porter said, the presence of strategy in a company is best indicated by what it decides not to do. Tim Cook said at Apple, the reason Apple is because everything we ever made fits on this desk in front of me. So less is more. Narrow your focus. This narrow your focus, credit goes to Al Ries for this term. And I want to say to you as entrepreneurs, if you are ever in trouble and ever in doubt what to do, your first instinct should be narrow your focus. Do less. Now, whether you narrow your market focus, your product focus, your supply chain focus, that is a matter of detail. But narrow your focus. We try to broaden focus because as engineers, at least this was my mistake, more value for money. More value for money, more value for money. But people do not buy more, of course they buy more value for money, but what they really want is more or sharper perception for money. There's a reason why BMW does not make a van, because a van cannot be an ultimate driving machine. This is their sacrifice. And to all success is inherent sacrifice. If there is a brand or a company that says, I do everything, I don't sacrifice anything, all markets, all products, all segments, all price points, everything, for sure, there is no strategy, and eventually there will be no success. It is called General Electric. You can read about it. Next, Contra 6, product specifications. I described very hurriedly, I think, how to try and determine specifications. My learning is that winning share from within a segment, again, slice of the pie, Me Too, is easy, is simple, is easy, but it's not sustainable. Shifting from another segment may seem riskier, may seem a bigger ask, but actually it is simpler, it's easier, it's sustainable. Because the minute you make a Pulsar, the other fellow has no answer. The minute you make something closer to a Coke, Coke can always respond. So winning intra-segment is easy, but only winning inter-segment is sustainable. I'm coming to the end, don't worry. Contra 7, next please. I said to you, a brand is not a brand unless it has a story and it can impart an experience. And this is something Mr. Trout said to me again and again over lunch. Because he knew that when we said motorcycles, I always thought assembly line, and he always thought the mind of a person. And he would say, motorcycles are built on the assembly line using many parts, but a brand is built in the mind using only one thing. That one thing or that one word, based on which you want consumers to think of your brand, is the most important thing in brand building. For example, I told you about KTM, the Austrian brand, the racing brand, the Paris-Dakar racing champion for 15 years. KTM owns one word in the motorcycle world, and that is called racing. And that's their tagline, ready to race. And they stay true to that story. They stay true to that experience. Every KTM bike is built to race. And that's why KTM, when we when we invested in it in 2007, KTM was making 65,000 motorcycles. As I told you, they were the second largest European motorcycle maker. Harley was sitting at 350,000 bikes. And we had this dream as Bajaj that one day we will take KTM to that level. And in Austria, nobody bought this story because you know how people are in Europe, right? I mean, they want to work at 1.5% GDP per year. So they do not think, some 1 or 2 zeros is always missing between us and them. 2-3 years back, we already overtook BMW. We means hard work was done by colleagues at KTM only and became Europe's largest motorcycle maker. This year, because Harley has been declining for whatever reason, Harley is estimated to finish at 240,000 motorcycles, and KTM will finish at 270,000 motorcycles. Now, who would have thought a racing motorcycle, which is as narrow and as sharp as that, can become a volume motorcycle? But that is my experience, that all volume starts from a niche. And the last one, number 8, is that a true test of any strategy, marketing strategy, product strategy, is whether it stands up to the test of PR. Is it dramatic enough to be news? Because if it's not newsworthy, then you're going to spend a shitload of money in communication trying to get people's attention. And Mr. Trout always told me this: you cannot sell, you have to supply a reason to buy. So friends, it comes back to the same thing again, that what is it that you can seed as a thought of differentiation or USP in the mind of the prospect, which brings them to you through one medium or the other. I mean, an example I would give is of the world of electric vehicles. Unfortunately, in my industry, in this country, people have gone out making cheap scooters, cheap e-rickshaws, making electric vehicles seem like some disposable, if I may say so, handicapped person's vehicle. Whereas we should have done a Tesla on 2 wheels or a Tesla on 3 wheels and created a different news, a different PR, a different drama around the whole thing. And we are going to try and do that next year in 2019, and hopefully you will see that. So thank your stars, I have finished. A lot of gyan in 45 minutes. And I say a lot of gyan because look at this quote from Gulzar on the next page, please. He says, इतना क्यों सिखाई जा रही है जिंदगी, हमें कौन सा सदिया गुजारना है यहाँ. So the idea was not to overwhelm you with the morning session, but to tell you that marketing is counterintuitive. That's why it's so difficult. And I believe very much in what Warren Buffett said, that invest in companies that an idiot can run, because one day an idiot will. And particularly in so-called, not actual, but so-called family-managed company. Like my grandfather was a great entrepreneur. His name was Kamalnan Bajaj. Now, although the chances of my father being bright were 50%, he was also bright. Then, as you know, in simple math terms, the chances of me being bright was 25%. I don't know if that's happened. Now, maybe my son, I don't. So the odds are so against you, or rather the odds are so much for an idiot running the company, that it's better to have a good strategy in place, because you can count on that. So in the end, my message is this. I think to succeed in business or marketing or entrepreneurship, I think we have to be quiet. Because if you're not quiet, you cannot think. When you're quiet, you can observe. I think thinking is egoistic. I think observation is very humble. We must observe first. Then it makes us humble. And when you're humble, I think you become very courageous. You don't lack courage then going into the marketplace. Because once you're humble, you know that nothing will stick. Success, failure, nothing will stick. Everything will pass. You can keep going on. Don't have to take anything personally. And that is what I think it is this quietness, observation, and humility that gives an entrepreneur courage. And as Aristotle said, courage is the most important virtue, because without it, we cannot act on any other virtue. So I close by saying that I hope you enjoyed it. If it has been useful to some of you, I will take credit for it. If some of you get my flu, Mr. Mariwala has to take debit for that. Thank you very much.